Adaptation is the key to survival. The intrinsic ability to become the apex predator in whatever environment you will inhabit will make you the ultimate threat. Grow, adapt, evolve, conquer. That is the way of the Sliver. Slivers are biological nightmare creatures of Magic the Gathering with a very nasty habit of changing their shape, form, material, and kind of all of that fun jazz depending on what plane they actually inhabit. They're essentially a multi-planar parasite hive mind with the uncanny ability to keep becoming better, especially in a group. Now, as weird as some of the creatures in Magic the Gathering get, the question, what the heck is going on here, is usually pretty straightforward to answer. Chromium, that's a metal elder dragon. Ulamog, eldritch horror titan. Llanowar elves, pointy-eared warriors from the forest. But we simply cannot say the same about the Slivers. They are absolutely bizarre, and they kind of actually freak me out a whole lot, if I'm being honest, which is a little bit frustrating because at first glance, they're kind of comical. Long, curved bodies, usually rocking a single claw-like arm, no face, just a weird little zigzag buck thing going on. But they actually go really crazy, man. The hive mind, it's all connected and they keep growing and crawling in my skin, I think. You see, every single sliver is connected to every other sliver through a shared consciousness, allowing them to instantly distribute adaptations across their entire population, as long as they're actually on the same plane, aka the same universe. So if one sliver develops wings, suddenly every sliver can fly. If one evolves thick with 3C's armor, then the entire hive becomes a plate mail force of death. For all my anime heads out there in the audience, imagine they're this hive mind version of Mahoraga from JJK.
You can see it, Mahoraga! You can see my curse technique!
They're not.
But you know why they really rustle my jimmies? What really irks me with them? For all the fear that they inspire, for all the FNMs that they've ruined for me. By the way, my editor runs a Sliver deck. As I adventure down this very long and winding road of Magic lore, Slivers remain one of the greatest mysteries in Magic history. No one really knows exactly where they came from. Dominaria, Wrath, Chandalar, a nameless plane, retcons, non-retcons, and I can't tell if it's retcon or not. They're an absolute enigma. Whenever someone in-universe actually tries to study them, weaponize them, clone them, or hell, even comprehend them, the hive adapts, the hive expands, the hive changes so we can't know, and that's kind of awesome, but also kind of uber terrifying. Over the years, Slivers have of course become one of Magic's all-time most iconic creature types, and so I've done my absolute best to learn about them as much as I could, and really want to highlight some key moments and key players for you right here. The rise of the Gravemother, maybe? So, in order to tell you the full story of the Slivers chronologically, I kind of have to start with arguably the most controversial part of the Sliver lore, or Slore, as I like to call it for short, long before the many tales of the Plane of Dominaria, the Phyrexian invasion, the Ur-Dragon spawn, or anything vaguely Thran. Somewhere out there in the blind eternities, which are Magic's multiverse, there existed a full plane inhabited by Slivers. But these fellas were not the mighty dominant hive mind that sprawled across the multiverse. Not yet. No, because I actually learned that the Slivers did not begin as conquerors at all. They were much more like you or I, servants to the machine being capitalism, probably, I don't know. The dominant civilizations of this still unnamed plane discovered the incredible adaptability of Slivers and then began domesticating them, kind of like cattle. Entire kingdoms were built upon the backs of the hive. Every generation of Slivers was selectively bred and cultivated for new and different tasks. And the civilizations above absolutely flourished. But deep below every continent, a Sliver storm was brewing. Sliver storm, get it at your local brewery today. Hidden within these subterranean kingdoms dwelled a Sliver queen unlike any that would come after her. She was patient, waiting with bated breath as she watched civilizations rise and fall across many ages. This queen would eventually become known as the Gravemother. While the civilizations above were crafting and shaping the future of the Slivers, their actions had some very unforeseen consequences. Since they didn't fully realize the wealth of Slivers below, every generation strengthened the hive. In turn, of course, strengthening their enemy's army below the crust as well. But, dear viewer, do not sell the Gravemother short. She was not simply creating stronger Slivers. She was pursuing perfection itself. She was kinda low-key the Yawgmoth of Slivers, and it was working way better, I will say, than Yawgmoth's Phyrexian planned it. And eventually, she achieved what no living creature had done before. She adapted to death itself. The Gravemother's final brood possessed the ability to rise again after destruction, turning death itself into a vestigial trait amongst her army, which meant that now she was finally ready to claim the entire plane for herself. So in a single night, she waged total war. She brought catastrophe, and the servants became the masters. Only the hive remains. The lore does paint a very chilling picture of the aftermath here. The plane itself became little more than a feeding ground. Any surviving civilizations were just hers to feed upon, preserved only when the Gravemother deemed them useful. It's a truly incredible origin story, I think, and it kind of makes my lips wet just thinking about it. But there's just one problem with it. I couldn't tell you if this is actually canon or not. Here's where it gets tricky. You see, Sliver Gravemother is a card from Commander Masters, and thanks to one promotional video, debate on the canonicity of this card has erupted throughout the entire Magic community. Now, to be fair, it's of course not just this one card, it's kind of the whole release, but for today's sake, it's mostly this card that represents this. This comment here from Corey Bowen, dressed as Commodore Guff, is what I'm actually talking about specifically.
I would not treat any card from this Commander Masters precon set as canon.
Okay.
We saw a Dreadhorde Sliver yesterday. That is not particularly canon.
When you lay it out on paper, what he is saying is that Commander Masters should not be treated as a source of canonical story information. But now, to be clear here, the statement specifically referenced another Sliver card, Lazotep Sliver, but based on this statement, the lore for Gravemother is fun and really sick, but not canon. So that's that, right? Well, not exactly. Hold your horses. Lord knows I wish it were just that simple, because there are also cards in Commander Masters that are just 100% canon, so not every card in the set and their lore are suddenly non-existent. And so because of that, eventually, in response to the entire debate, Magic lore master Jay Anelli later clarified that the issue being spoken on may not have been whether the cards were canon or non-canon, but rather that Wizards wanted to avoid creating this sort of expectation that every single Commander Masters cards represents a full canon historical event. Some cards very clearly depict story moments that we know actually happened and characters that exist within Magic's lore, while some others are designed primarily for gameplay and flavor. As a result, the Gravemother specifically occupies this strange position within the entire lore and canon of the story. She has lore, she has a story, and nothing about it really contradicts anything else we know about the Magic universe, so is it or is it not real? I honestly couldn't tell you. Regardless, there is a canon story to them that I do absolutely want to share about Slivers, and for today's purposes, it is the start of the Sliver story. You can kind of decide for yourself if you want to treat this one as canon or not, what we just talked about. Volrath, Lord of the Slivers. Enter Volrath, the Dark Ruler of Wrath. Wow, they share a name. Wrath was an artificial plane secretly controlled by the Phyrexians, a different, more evil hive mind, and it was designed to eventually merge with the super important plane of Dominaria as part of the massive Phyrexian invasion. Volrath himself was a shapeshifter, master manipulator and obsessive collector of unusual creatures, so as you can imagine, exactly the sort of guy who'd want to get down with the Slivers. At some point during his many travels, Volrath visited a, get this, unnamed plane and encountered the Sliver culture. Now, in full transparency here, I don't think we know if this was the Sliver's original homeworld, the supposed non-canon Gravemother's plane, or somewhere else entirely. What we do know, though, is that Volrath became absolutely obsessed with these little freaks here, and rather than simply capturing some, he up and brought the dang Sliver Queen back to Wrath, establishing the first known canonical Sliver hive. Once these things were on Wrath, Volrath began experimenting right away. And I'm experimenting, by the way, and getting more engagement on these videos. In all honesty, I kind of have a blast doing these, and I'm trying to figure out why YouTube loves some of these videos and doesn't love others as much. If you want to help me test my hypothesis here and you're on mobile and you want to help out, slide over and hit that hype button. I think it might make a huge difference and you'd be supporting me, not an evil guy like Volrath. Who, by the way, then started Sliv Operation by separating portions of the Queen's brood from the hive and imprisoned them within the Furnace of Wrath, a volcanic region whose magical energies amplified aggression and violence. Volrath, in true Phyrexian fashion, then of course began genetically altering these Slivers. Around this time, he also created his own artificial version known as metallic Slivers. Now, these constructs kind of resembled Slivers physically, but lacked their connection to the hive mind, which is actually why Volrath primarily used them as spies, planting them amongst the hive to gather information for him. Honestly, hands down pretty smart. Even with all of his tinkering though, the population on Wrath remained relatively small. Before the invasion of Dominaria, the entire hive numbered fewer than 5,000 total Slivers, but that was okay because their true purpose, of course, was to guard a set of valuable artifacts in his possession that could be used to slay his own god, Yawgmoth. I just did a whole video on him a while ago. It's pretty wild stuff, you can check it out later. The Slivers became guardians of the Legacy, a collection of powerful artifacts assembled over generations as part of Urza's long-term plan to finally defeat Phyrexia. These artifacts were being sought by the crew of the Weatherlight, and so it was no surprise, I think, that when the Weatherlight crew ventured into the Furnace of Wrath, they found themselves facing a Sliver hive. Luckily though, they did have an ace up their sleeve, which is my man, Karn. Karn entered negotiations with the Sliver Queen herself, and since Karn was a silver golem, a living part of the legacy weapon itself, Karn here used empathy of all things to convince the Queen of Slivers to just give him the legacy. It's honestly genius, very touching, and kind of hilarious that that's what happened. Karn pretty much just said, hey, these aren't just tools, they are part of me. They are my hive, just as every Sliver belonged to the Queen's brood. The legacy was basically an extension of Karn himself, so she handed it over and got burned to a crisp in a volcano. Yeah, remember how I said that Wrath was an artificial plane created to connect Phyrexia to Dominaria in like a sandwich Oreo situation? Well, when that happened, the Slivers materialized within the volcanic wastelands of Urborg and died almost immediately. Poor guys. So, by the end of the Phyrexian invasion, the Sliver Queen was dead, her hive shattered, and the species appeared to be extinct. More Slivers, more problems. Well, at least they were extinct until some dumb wizards brought them back to life, back to reality, and suddenly the multiverse was no longer safe from the slivering. And for that, we can thank the Riptide Project. Now, what is that? The Riptide Project was a magical research organization based on the island of Otaria on the plane of, yes, once again, Dominaria. They were excavating the ruins of Volrath's stronghold that landed in Urborg, and like all good sci-fi scientists, they accidentally uncovered Sliver remains and immediately tried to revive them. The problem here though was that they didn't really get it. They had no idea that these things were a hive that functioned through a queen, not through each other. So they made the mistake of not recreating the Sliver Queen, and without a queen, the hive lacked direction, basically no different than a 22-year-old postgrad. The reborn Slivers multiplied uncontrollably, adapted to every containment measure thrown at them, and rapidly overran the island housing this very project. And this actually happened around the same time another issue was happening in the same area, because the Mirari, an immensely powerful magical artifact that warped reality itself, had now begun unleashing waves of magical energy across the entire continent. You can learn all about that in my Karn and Artifacts video, by the way. Essentially, the Mirari amplified desires, but for some other very odd reason, the magical waves it was blasting out always resembled the sound of their lost queen. So confused, and also very desperate for their Dami Mommy, hordes of Slivers abandoned their nests and migrated towards the source. This mass movement eventually drew them to the Battle of Sanctum, a massive clash that ended in a truly devastating explosion that inadvertently killed the huge mass of assembled Slivers. But some of the Hive was still around and kicking, and those in the immediate vicinity of the explosion that survived combined to form the Sliver Overlord. And unlike the Queen, who served as the mother of the Hive, the Overlord represented something closer to the collective consciousness itself, the hive mind itself given a physical form. And then just around the plane, tons of these guys just started popping up everywhere. Gem-hide Slivers developed the capacity to generate mana of any color, Vampiric Slivers drained life from their prey, Basal Slivers willingly sacrificed themselves to strengthen the hive, paralleling a bunch of different factions that they ended up near. They were adapting the traits of the plane and the creatures of it. And while Dominaria is now just their primary home, turns out that these bad boys are just everywhere. On Chandalar, explorers discovered an entirely different Sliver civilization known as the Scap. These Slivers had evolved into bizarre new forms, including larger humanoid prime Slivers capable of chatting it up with the homies using words like a person, which is freaky. Slivers also seem to appear on planes such as Alara and even Mirrodin, the artificial plane altered by the Mirari. The Alara ones might be my personal favorite now, just because the reason we think they're from there is because there are a few cards with keywords from the Alara block. The first Sliver has Cascade, first Sliver's Chosen has Exalted, and the Dragscape Sliver, named after a location on Alara, has Unearth. What a really fun and creative way, I gotta say, to do a lore drop, Wizards. I commend you on this one. Crazy to think that the first Sliver may be from Alara. If so, is it like the first of all Slivers or the first Alaran Sliver? I suppose only one creature actually knows if that's true or not. The dominant ruler and soul of Alara, the manifestation of mana itself on that plane. And you know what? He has some definite lore that shows up why he is the top dog. We're talking about Progenitus, the Hydra avatar of the plane of Alara, and if you want to learn all about that guy, check out this video where I dug into the legendary Hydra and all his fun lore. Otherwise, as always, thanks for watching. If you have any feedback, criticism, wishes, demands, put it in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts on the recent videos and what you want to watch and any feedback. Otherwise, have a fantastic day.